Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. One of the things I loved and still love about Pee-wee's Playhouse is the set design. Instead of a consistent, seamless, unified look, the Playhouse was a jagged, eclectic mashup, where a Greek statue and Egyptian sphinx collided with Art Deco, Cubism, Surrealism, Dada, pop art, and other styles. As set designer Gary Panter stated, "We put art history all over the show." I've often wondered why more artists don't take this mix-and-match approach. So you can imagine my delight when I discovered today's guest, whose work draws from ancient iconography, paintings by the old masters, movies, comic books, pulp magazines, and more.
We're delighted to talk to Joel Silverstein, a prolific artist, curator, teacher, critic, and a founding member of the Jewish Art Salon. His new book is The Brighton Beach Bible, an autobiographical painted narrative based around the Exodus story. Joel, welcome to Amusing Jews.
This is a great honor for me. Hi, guys. Thank you for having me on.
You're a cultural, non-observant Jew, yet your work often incorporates images derived from the Hebrew Bible and Jewish religious figures like Maimonides and the Maharal. What is your background, and how does it manifest in the Brighton Beach Bible and your other work?
I guess I believe like a Reformed Jew and study like an Orthodox Jew. The whole goal, I think, was to make a creative space, to delve within Judaism, to make a creative space where visual art is an important part of that dialogue, not just textual study and how they interrelate. And I think that's kind of like a postmodern idea where text and visuality kind of like mix and match. So, I would say like, I'm going to give a shout out to my group, the Jewish Art Salon. I'm the head of exhibitions, director of exhibitions with my friend Richard McBee. The director of the whole thing that I want to give a special shout out is Yona Verver, who's the director and the original founder. And this was the thing. There were many visual artists in New York that were trying to show Jewish-based stuff, and they had trouble. They had trouble within the Jewish world, and they had trouble within the secular art world, very often from secular Jews or anybody. That Jewish content really could not be shown. So 2008, we founded our group. We've been very successful to the degree that we can be in this milieu today, or over the years. So we started about 18 years ago, something like that. And we have over 500 members, not just in New York, but in California, Chicago, Israel, Europe. We have branches in Amsterdam, Germany, England, all over the world. So we have over, especially in Israel too. We've joined with Israel numerous times. We've shown in Europe, shown here. And so we get a great mix of the religious and the non-religious, so I'd say that's an important part of it. I think for myself, very much, I was a Brooklyn kid. I grew up in Gravesend, which is near Brighton and Coney Island. I went to Lincoln on the beach. I grew up with horror movies, epics like Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, which was really, for kids of my generation, that was it. That was Prince of Egypt plus X10. And I grew up in an observant family. We kept kosher and stuff like that. But there was this real strong mix of the kind of culturally Jewish, the American Jewish, and pop culture in general. And so I tend to jump back and forth. I was trained as a painter at Pratt. I took a master's in art therapy, a lot of psychology, a lot of Freud and Jung. And I stepped back into Judaism big time. Like if you're into movies and you're into comics and you're into text and you're into interpretation and you're into American Jews who have achieved, then there's a whole world to like keep on mining and keep on talking about, and it's never ending. It really is. And I'm amazed that American Jews kind of know, but don't know. So there's a lot to discuss here.
It's interesting that you're mentioning all that. I think when people think of Jewish art, particularly in the United States, they think of Judaica objects that are ceremonial, or even like kind of, I will call it cheesy, kitschy artwork. So what you're describing with the Jewish Art Salon is basically real artists who are doing really important Jewish work.
Right. Absolutely. Again, there are 500 of us. I think there are about 20 or 25 of us that are, either notable artists, or should be. They're doing important work. And they were trained essentially in Western art, in regular, Michelangelo, Rembrandt, Titian, Tintoretto, or modern artists, either abstract or figurative. And they were drawn back to Jewish content. And it's interesting because I grew up as an Ashkenazi Jew in Brooklyn, but I grew up on the edge of a Haredi neighborhood like Gravesend. There were Orthodox Jews that are Haredi, Black Hat. There were some modern Orthodox that are very secular Jews. And then there was a huge Sephardic and Mizrahi neighborhood. That's the biggest Sephardic neighborhood in the United States, is Avenue S, Avenue T. And what was interesting was that I was exposed to a kind of wide range of Jewish thinking and Jewish attitudes, cultural practice, and, kind of like thought. And that kind of helped me, assimilate a wide range of influence, I think. And so I was able to bring that to bear, after I went to art school, after I went to Pratt, after I met secular Jews in the art world who were critics and I don't know how much you know about the New York art scene, but the New York, at the abstract expressionists, a chunk of them were Jews, like Mark Rothko and Philip Guston. The critics were all Jews, Clement Greenberg and Harold Rosenberg. So you're talking about Jews really dealing with their own cultural identities in a bigger milieu. And these guys very often were a little embarrassed. They kind of hid it. They kind of cloaked themselves in, I'm a universal artist. And I don't blame them, because mid-century there was a lot of anti-Semitism, but people should know kind of the story behind the story, I think. In Judaism, Judaica is mainly the fore of old ideas about Jewish art. But truthfully, within Judaism, there have been wide periods of very visual Jewish art that doesn't make the radar up front. So in other words, the ancient world was filled with Jewish mosaics and murals. The first painting that I'm going to show is kind of takeoff on an ancient Roman synagogue where you had big panels of murals with Bible figures. It's called Dura Europos. In the medieval period and later in the Renaissance, you got illustrated, Siddurim and, Passover goddess, stuff like that. Then the modern period from like the 18th and 19th century, you got wholesale Jews jumping into the art world. I mean, Jews basically invented art history in the West. The joke was under Nazi Germany, they cleared all the Jews of professorial positions. Something like a third were Jewish professors of art history. Like the amount of people that had PhDs in art history, 33% of them were Jews under the Nazis, which is crazy, And then all the modernists like Rothko and all those guys, Chagall, and there are a million of them. And so Ben Shorn, we can go on and on. And then the creation of the American comic book, which again are mostly Jews. Superman, Batman, almost everyone. Will Eisner, who invented the American graphic novel, all Jews. Mad Magazine, Tales from the Crypt, all Jews, So Jews did address visuality, but they had to do it kind of in a roundabout way, like under the radar. And I think, again, that makes it fascinating. It's like the Jews that wrote Christmas songs, like, Jingle Bell Rock is written by Jews, or White Christmas written by Irving Berlin. And it's like to make that known is like a very interesting part of this like cultural phenomenon. So that's part of the mix about, I think, what contemporary Jewish art is about.
One of the first pieces of yours I saw was the Ten Commandments, A Question, inspired by an 1,800-year-old mural from the Dura Europos synagogue in what is today Syria. Your painting has two Moseses, one Charlton Heston and the other, I think, a self-portrait. The Hudson River serving as the Red Sea dividing New York from Jerusalem, as well as Wonder Woman, the creature from the Black Lagoon, and other pop culture references. It's fun to look at, even if the viewer doesn't understand all the symbolism. Do you have an audience in mind when you're creating a piece like this?
When a Jewish artist tries to make a painting, who's he painting it for? Why would you even bother? It seems like such a bastardized, crazy notion that something could be, are you making religious art? Is it secular? Is it like, do you believe? Do you don't believe? Do you put it in a synagogue? Do you put it in a gallery? So the answer I would say is this, that first of all, the artist has to please him or herself, their self. They have to believe that there's an audience. Just like I think if you went back to the modern artists, Rothko was painting for Rothko and Picasso was painting for Picasso. That's the first thing. So you do that, right? Secondly, I think there's an imagined hybrid audience, and that is that many Jews are very visually savvy. They're very cultured. As a people, we're very cultured and we're very book smart and book savvy. In terms of like interpretation, I'm always like amazed I'm always amazed also how Jewish culture kind of either parallels or predates Western culture in so many ways, philosophically and in every way, And I think you have to imagine a visual audience for this stuff and hope that people get it. And if not, I could tell you about my plans for the iconography. I could tell you this means that or this means that. The truth is, you bring your own meaning to it. And if you don't, my work, because it is classically based and pop based, my hope is that it's entertaining, even if you don't. You get something. You know what I mean? You get the drift. You get the kind of mood. You get washed over by the colors. And I've had people go, well, what is this about? But I like that you have Superman in your painting, or I like that you have, Wonder Woman is in the back, or whatever. And what did you mean by that? And I don't mind telling you, but again, I can tell you my take. I think there's a certain amount of freewheeling interpretation in any painting, but I do hold to a kind of iconography. I would say that. I think it's important, and in a way that makes me not modern. I think modern art is kind of more based on the abstraction of the image and it's what you bring to it. I think I would say that kind of you could read my paintings. I think you could. And then you have a dialogue with me or with text. There's a dialogue with Jewish text or the movies or whatever.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. Speaking of the Exodus, your book, The Brighton Beach Bible, fuses Brighton Beach, Coney Island, and the biblical story, tying it all together with images of Michelangelo's Moses, Harry Houdini, the mutant from This Island Earth, the golem from the 1915 German film, and other influences. How does the Exodus story intersect with your own life's journey?
The book started because I applied for a grant from the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture. And this professor, Matthew Beigel, said, I want you to try out. I want to give high five to Matthew. And I got the grant. So I got all this money to do the book. I was thrilled. The book took 2 years of my life between painting, editing. Oh, this is the part I should mention also. The book was done. The text was written with Ori Z. Soltis, who did the text, and then we worked together. He is a professor of religious studies at Georgetown University, Jewish studies, and he's a great scholar. He knows like 20 languages, all this stuff like that. So Ori, high five and thank you. And again, did the images, text was written, had to write the text together, rewrote the text, to do the text over, made sure that it was edited down. It was from 150 images down to about 75. Hand painted many of them, then digitally painted others. And I had to think of a sequence that made it more like a comic or more like the inside of a church. Pardon me, in Jewish studies, but same thing of like a church, kind of like the Arena Chapel, which is in Italy. And it's kind of like this narrative cycle that you could read around. So it's about 75 images altogether. Again, raised in near Coney Island, Brighton Beach, went to school there and everything. That experience of the beach was an incredible catharsis. Because going to the beach as a teenager and stuff like that. And then I used to take long walks on the beach when I was in my 30s with my wife. I got married. The beach, Coney Island is this ruin that's being rebuilt, but 30 years ago it was really a ruin. And it carried all the ghosts of the original amusement park. Like, the Cyclone is there. And when I was there, the ruin of the Thunderbolt was there. The Wonder Wheel is there. When I was a kid, the ruins of Steeplechase were still there. So you saw these ruined buildings and some of them were still working and everything. Now it's somewhat better. The crowd in Coney Island and Brighton is very eclectic. So you had old Jewish people. Like when I was a kid, you actually saw Holocaust survivors with numbers on their hands. I saw religious Jews when I was a teenager, and now especially Russian Jews coming in from the ex-Soviet Union big time. Hispanics, Black people, and everybody else, like Afghanis and Chinese people. Everybody goes to the beach. And it's this crazy mix that's surreal. It is so nutty. If I could tell you, I have witnessed Hasidic Jews that don't go to the beach would go there on the Jewish holidays to do tashlik in their full garments. You could not make up a movie like that, you know? Woody Allen living under the cyclone, and I think it was Annie Hall. It was not the cyclone, it was the thunderbolt. There was an actual house there that I remember as a kid, and the family actually lived there. So you couldn't make this stuff up. I mean, it actually is this crazy jackdaw world that really is there, and it's still there. You know what I mean? And it's still a kind of crazy resort for New Yorkers, you know? So that experience became almost like the scene for a biblical epic. It became like the scene for this kind of like crazy comic book Cecil B. DeMille movie in my head, you know? And that's where it came from, essentially. And I was written after and living in New York and everything. I moved to Jersey as a middle-aged person. There was this thing of like, my grandparents moved from Russia to New York. They settled in South Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst, they lived in. And I was leaving Brooklyn to go to Jersey. And so there was this whole thing of like the flights, the exodus of it. And so I think that played a big part.
I've always thought of eclecticism as an important Jewish cultural trait developed from our ancestors' migrations, negotiations, and adaptations in a world that often pushed them to the margins, occasionally allowed them into the mainstream, and within Jewish communities promoted dialogue, debate, and creative storytelling. Would you say that your freewheeling eclecticism is itself a Jewish artistic trait?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, it's interesting because you can find classical Jewish thought, the rabbis and stuff like that. But as you know, Jews don't agree on anything. And even when there's a majority opinion, there's a minority opinion. And I think the whole emphasis of Jews on text, when they got into visual worlds, there was this explosion of assimilation and back and forth, and how, Jewish food, Jewish, all kinds of cultural practice, it reflects the countries that they were in, but especially Jewish figures emerging into Western thought. And that is really novels, that is really movies, that is really comics, that is really visual art. There's this explosion that happens, and some of it, again, is hidden, but there's this grappling with it. One of my favorite artists is Philip Guston, who was a great late 20th century artist, incredible. He got sick of he was an abstract expressionist. He was pals with Pollock and other people. He got sick of it. He felt that art was supposed to tell stories, either pure or unpure. He felt art was essentially impure, and all this stuff about abstraction was like BS, okay? Ross Feld wrote a book about his friend, and he pictured Guston as the weird Jewish kid in the Venetian ghetto. You know what I mean? Like, so if you could picture in the Venetian ghetto, okay, there were Jews living there in the Renaissance, in the 18th century, and they're seeing all this stuff going on, and they're participating as much as they can. They're excluded from a lot of things, but, Jews are very prominent in Venice, right? And there's this one Jewish kid in the Jewish ghetto that's looking out, and like, he doesn't fit in, but he adapts in a kind of bizarre way. And so he said, Guston is that guy. Guston is the guy listening to the Renaissance and doing this crazy thing. If you look at Guston's paintings, they're a hard mix of brilliant painting and very crude cartooning. So he painted Nixon. He painted himself as a KKK guy, which is crazy because he was a Jew. He painted big fists holding stuff and big legs. And there's all this kind of interpretation that the legs stand in for the Holocaust, and this kind of post-Holocaust take on Renaissance art, because he loved Italy. He went to Italy a whole bunch of times. Anyway, that's how I see Jews, and that's how I see Jews in culture. It's kind of like the clean and the dirty, you know what I mean? And we have our own agenda because we don't exactly fit in. Like, people try, and then they chop their legs off to fit in, and they still don't fit in. So, I find that very interesting. And with what's going on now, there's a whole cycle back again where we still don't fit in, So, I find that very interesting as well. So I think that's part of that. Those kind of choices that one makes is very much the role of Jewish artists, I think.
In addition to eclectic imagery, your work is also mixed media and mixed genre. How do you go about repurposing characters like Superman, Hawkman, the Shadow, the Golem, and movie images like Moses for your artwork? Do they have Jewish meanings for you?
First of all, the Golem is a Jewish character, so I use that a lot. Harry Houdini is a Jewish character, and those have very strong resonant meanings. A character like Cecil B. DeMille's Moses is really fascinating because I don't even know, you guys may know this, okay? DeMille was actually Jewish, had a Jewish mother who converted, was a dead secret did not reveal it until years and years after he died, because DeMille knew that the man who made King of Kings about Jesus could not come out as a Jew in any way, shape, or form. And I find that fascinating that, that's relatively recently. I mean, where that thing, he's really Jewish. Oh my God, So there's that, again, that double-edged sword that I find really fascinating. But like I said, comic book characters created, like certainly Superman, there's all this Jewish aspirational material in the Superman story. The fact that it's a truncated Moses story. The rocket ship is really like the Ark. His name is Kal-El. His dad is Jor-El, which are truncated Hebrew names that actually have some meaning to it. Jerry Siegel stated, actually, in writing Superman, he had Samson and biblical heroes in mind. He said that, actually. So there's a lot of this. Now, they wouldn't want that known to an American audience at that time, certainly, And so there's that gulf of, we're back to Clark Kent Superman, that thing of the double identity. And are you Jewish or are you American? I think that's very telling. Superman, for many people, is it a gay cloaked identity from 50 years ago? Is it, but I think that thing of being one and secretly being the other is very potent for Jews. And it's something that it's still some discomfort with. The word Jew or Jewish is very telling, because when I was a kid, Jew was usually used in a bad way, like you blah, 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 Jew. And so even presidents, I heard Obama correct himself in saying Jew and then Jewish, because there is certain cultural resonance with that in America that has kind of different meanings than it would be as, Jew as a religion, say. So it's all those kind of issues, But the whole repurposing thing, I think, is a modern way to use iconography in a traditional way. So, in other words, for me, the shadow is kind of like the Jewish God that is not there. That is, the monotheistic God that's, how can I say it? That has no image. The shadow has no image because he's invisible. He's there, but he's not there. And so for Jews, there's that whole thing of like, Moses talks to God and they say Moses is the only man who saw God face to face. Then there's an episode where Moses talks to God, but it's his back. It's not really his face. Then, the prophets and stuff say you cannot see God. He's immaterial, kind of like the whole development in Judaism of he's there but not there. So in other words, those kind of symbols can be used for different meanings, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, the shadow also knows what's in the heart of people, which is not a human capability. And of course, the voice of Orson Welles on the radio show sounds like God as well.
Right, exactly. There is that. I mean, I did a painting of Isaiah, a different series. I had a show at HUC Heller, Hi Genie, who's the director there, and all those people. Anyway, I did a whole series of each. I was Tanakh, so it was a 3x4 foot painting for each book of the Hebrew Bible, right? And I love the prophets too. I did Exodus a lot and, Genesis and all that. But the prophets are kind of like superheroes to me. And that there's a part in the latter part of Isaiah, which is, the utterance of the profound monotheistic point of view. There is no longer ghosts of the gods of Egypt. There is no longer angels or anything else. God says, I make good, I make evil, I create light, I create darkness. You don't get a more profound, extreme statement like that. And I think all of Judaism, I think it's Isaiah 44, right? Second Isaiah. It sounded exactly like the beginning of The Adventures of Superman, the George Reeves show. Yes, it's Superman, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men, So this is like declarative statement of a kind of metaphysic. It's a metaphysical reality. There's this character that does good, right? And helps people and knows everything and can do everything, basically, And so that seemed real. First of all, like I said, Superman is kind of Jewish, you know what I mean? And so there are these resonances where, I don't know if it's real or not. And you know what? I guess I don't care. Like, I don't need to kind of declare it in a practical fundamentalist way or anything else. I think as I would behave as a moral person and use these as artistic tropes, as kind of symbols, like in the realm of poetry. And I think in that realm, they are best used. I'm not taking away from religious people, observant people. I would like a hybrid where these symbols can be used by people without getting at each other's throats, which at this point, you're on one team or the other team, basically, which is meaning like the belief team or the atheist team. And there's no gray area with that.
I appreciate your mixing of the classical iconography of the biblical characters, for instance, and the more pop cultural icons and putting them on an equal plane as well. Because if we're being dispassionate and a step removed, today's mythology is superheroes, is the Marvel universe, the DC universe, all that stuff. And it really isn't that different from the biblical material.
The core of the symbology is pure and can never be mined to extinction. I think there's an inherent goodness and wealth in Superman or whatever, that you could get a more intellectual idea or a more creative idea out of it. Instead, I know Martin Scorsese hates the Marvel movies and all that stuff, but I think it's like anything else in literature and art. It's like a good artist could mine that symbol to a purpose, like at any point.
Would you mind sharing some of your artwork with us?
Absolutely, I'd be glad to. That's the cover of the book. And again, you can see Brighton on the top. There is a Hasidic wedding going on. And even though, so it's kind of like a shtetl, it's like a memory of the shtetl. Top right, you can see the parachute jump. Michelangelo's, a fragment of Michelangelo's Last Judgment is in there. Bottom right, you could see a Batman bucket, and there's the Metaluna Mutant actually in the bucket there. There's a fragment of Samson getting his hair trimmed by Delilah on the right there. So it's this whole mix of stuff. So this jumps in the book again, back and forth. This is from the Ramesseum. Those are statues of Ramses on the Nile. And this is hand painted. And it's from a photograph, but I made it like a romantic painting. And I jump around from Brighton Beach to the Nile and stuff like that. So you can see that. This is another painting done on the beach. You could see the beach stuff over there, but it's supposed to be the first plague. And this is one of the first panels in the book. And that's an actual painting. It's actually a triptych, and I digitized the lines out of it. So it's 3 pieces of wood together. And the whole painting is 4x7 feet. This is called Bass Beach. And again, I love symbolist painting in the 19th century. It's not popular. It's making a comeback in the galleries, actually. And so symbolism is this weird, surreal movement in the 1890s, 1900, before abstraction. Those 2 figures are kind of like contemplating the dawn coming up. Bast is a cat goddess in Egyptian culture, and so there's a giant cat on the beach. And so this is supposed to be kind of like in Egypt, but it's really Brighton. It's the same thing. This is when Pharaoh says to his Egyptian minions to kill the firstborn, and he sends in these Egyptian shock troopers to slay the Jewish firstborn. And there's Shifra and Puah, who are these 2 Egyptian Jewish midwives, and they save Jewish children. They save Moses. As they do this deal with Pharaoh like that. I made the stormtrooper into the Martian this is a early version of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. It was a fragment of a drawing that I expanded and kind of imagined. And it's that kind of fear of being confronted. This is a painting also based on beach material. It's the Finding of Moses. And it's actual people that I mixed in. The kid is too old to be the real Moses, to be a baby, but he's kind of like a heroic Renaissance kind of Moses. This is supposed to be Miriam. Well, on the left is the princess Batya, who raises Moses as her own, but Moses is ferried out to Moses' actual mother. Miriam finds him and goes, "Oh, I have a midwife. I have a breast nurse," and it turns out to be Moses' own mother. So I have a person next to Miriam's like a teenager. Moses is a baby. He's wearing a Hawkman mask, but I wanted that reference. In Egypt, they had a sky god named Horus who looks a lot like Hawkman. It's the same thing. It's like he's Hawkman, you know what I mean? So I had him in a Hawkman mask like that. This is Moses' slaying of the Egyptian. I took it from an actual relief from the Ramesses period. And I made the guy with the beard Moses and the guy on the right the overseer. And so he's strangling him or killing him. The top is collage. And that's like a painting with collage in it. So again, that mix. This is the burning bush. That's an adolescent friend of mine. It's supposed to be the young Moses, but if you look, he's wearing an old Moses t-shirt. So the Michelangelo Moses. Instead of an angel, I used the Metaluna mutant. There's something really crazy about that big head. He's like a lobster brain man. It's like really weird. The burning bush, the ark is from Dura, so I copied the actual Dura Europus. But there's a reference to the Holocaust there. There's a thing about the flame being the memory of the Holocaust. The background is an actual photograph of Sinai. So I mixed all these things. That's an actual painting also. This picture of my wife, Julie, so there's a lot of references to my actual life. My wife, Julie, has been a big inspiration in my life. She's an artist too. She's painting on the beach. The snakes were done in actual time. So I took rubber snakes, brought them to the beach. My wife and son helped me. Every time the surf came in, washed out the snakes out of it, and grabbed the snakes, go back, photograph them. So we did a whole take on the beach. The background again is Brighton. So there's again this double time. Julie is breaking the fourth wall and looking out at the audience. Julie and my son are in the top left. My son is 26 now. This is when he was like 12. So it was based on older material. But it's a composite, so it's partly a real painting, and the right part is digital. These are the last two images in the book, and I'm setting up a visual comparison. It's like a conundrum, and it's an allegory. On the left is the tent of sacrifice done in the desert, the Mishkan, which is the mobile unit. You know what I mean? Temple's not built, but it's this kind of mobile shock unit. You know, we're going to do the sacrifices there. We put up the boards, we put up the curtain, you know what I mean? And all this stuff happens. On the right is the golden calf. And so I have like Swamp Thing in these hands, and there's a calf in there, and kind of like vestiges of Egyptian idolatry. And so it's this comparison. And I don't have any answers. It's like good imagery, bad imagery. What constitutes idolatry? What's okay to paint? What's not okay to paint? And that's kind of like an interesting question, you know, and I'm not offering a hard answer on this.
So Joel, how can our audience find you and follow your work?
Oh, thank you. Well, I have a website. It's joelsilversteinart.com. And I have the book itself is on sale on Amazon. You can look up the Brighton Beach Bible or Brighton Beach Bible or my name, Joel Silverstein. All those will come up to the Brighton Beach Bible. Or you can, keep your eyes out, because I have done book signings at events up here in New York and New Jersey. So yeah, and you can reach me via my website or jsilversteinart@gmail.com. You're welcome to, contact me directly with any questions or anything like that. So
awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And this was really like a gas. I can't appreciate it. And also I would just say, please follow the Jewish Art Salon. Look up the website. It's the Jewish Art Salon. Just type that in, it'll come up. Again, 500 artists, and the director is Yona Berber, and we're very proud of the work we're doing. And we're curating 2 or 3 shows right now, actually.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.